of her bursting into tears, of her throwing herself into his arms, of her falling down in a fainting fit without previous word or sign. But any approach to such a line of conduct as this had been so far from his thoughts that he could only look at her in silent wonder. Dolly, in the meanwhile, turned to the corners of her apron, and measured the sides, and smoothed out the wrinkles, and was as silent as he. At last, after a long pause, Joe said good bye. 'Good bye,' said Dolly, with as pleasant a smile as if he were going to the next street, and were coming back to supper. 'Good bye.' 'Come,' said Joe, putting out both hands. 'Dolly, dear Dolly, don't let us part like this. I love you dearly, with all my heart and soul, with as much truth and earnestness as ever man loved woman in this world, I do believe. I am a poor fellow, as you know, poorer now than ever, for I have fled from home, not being able to bear it any longer, and must fight my own way without help. You are beautiful, admired, are loved by everybody, are well off and happy, and may you ever be so. Heaven forbid I should ever make you otherwise, but give me a word of comfort. Say something kind to me. I've no right to expect it of you, I know, but I ask it because I love you, and shall treasure the slightest word from you all through my life. Dolly, dearest, have you nothing to say to me?' No, nothing. Dolly was a coquette by nature, and a spoilt child. She had no notion of being carried by storm in this way. The coachmaker would have been dissolved in tears, and would have knelt down, and called himself names, and clasped his hands, and beat his breast, and tugged wildly at his cravat, and done all kinds of poetry. Joe had no business to be going abroad. He had no right to be able to do it. If he was in adamantine chains, he couldn't. 'I have said good bye,' said Dolly, 'twice. Take your arm away directly, Mr Joseph, or I'll call Miggs.' 'I'll not reproach you,' answered Joe. 'It's my fault, no doubt. I have thought sometimes that you didn't quite despise me, but I was a fool to think so. Every one must, who has seen the life I have led. You most of all. God bless you.' He was gone. Actually gone. Dolly waited a little while, thinking he would return, peeped out at the door, looked up the street and down as well as the increasing darkness would allow, came in again, waited a little longer, went upstairs humming a tune, bolted herself in, laid her head down on her bed, and cried as if her heart would break. And yet such natures are made up of so many contradictions, that if Joe Willet had come back that night, next day, next week, next month, the odds are 100 to 1 she would have treated him in the very same manner, and have wept for it afterwards with the very same distress. She had no sooner left the workshop, than there cautiously peered out from behind the chimney of the forge a face which had already emerged from the same concealment twice or thrice, unseen, and which, after satisfying himself that it was now alone, was followed by a leg, a shoulder, and so on by degrees, until the form of Mr Tappertit stood confessed, with a brown paper cup stuck negligently on one side of its head, and its arms very much akimbo.
'Have my ears deceived me,' said the 'prentice, 'or do I dream? Am I to thank thee, Fortune, or to cuss thee? Which?' He gravely descended from his elevation, took down his piece of looking glass, planted it against the wall upon the usual bench, twisted his head round, and looked closely at his legs. 'If they're a dream,' said Sim, 'let sculptors have such visions, and chisel 'em out when they wake. This is reality. Sleep has no such limbs as them. Tremble, Willet, and despair. She's mine, she's mine.' With these triumphant expressions, he seized a hammer and dealt a heavy blow at a vice, which in his mind's eye represented the sconce or head of Joseph Willet. That done, he burst into a peal of laughter, which startled Miss Miggs, even in her distant kitchen, and dipping his head into a bowl of water, had recourse to a jack towel inside the closet door,
which served the double purpose of smothering his feelings and drying his face. Joe, disconsolate and downhearted, but full of courage too on leaving the locksmith's house, made the best of his way to the Crooked Billet, and there inquired for his friend the serjeant, who, expecting no man less, received him with open arms. In the course of 5 minutes after his arrival at that house of entertainment, he was enrolled among the gallant defenders of his native land, and within half an hour was regaled with a steaming supper of boiled tripe and onions, prepared, as his friend assured him, more than once, at the express command of his most sacred Majesty the King. To this meal, which tasted very savoury after his long fasting, he did ample justice, and when he had followed it up, or down, with a variety of loyal and patriotic toasts, he was conducted to a straw mattress in a loft over the stable, and locked in there for the night. The next morning he found that the obliging care of his martial friend had decorated his hat with sundry party-coloured streamers, which made a very lively appearance, and in company with that officer and 3 other military gentlemen newly enrolled, who were under a cloud so dense that it only left 3 shoes, a boot, and a coat and a half visible among them, repaired to the riverside. Here they were joined by a corporal and 4 more heroes, of whom 2 were drunk and daring, and 2 sober and penitent, but each of whom, like Joe, had his dusty stick and bundle. The party embarked in a passage boat bound for Gravesend, whence they were to proceed on foot to Chatham. The wind was in their favour, and they soon left London behind them, a mere dark mist, a giant phantom in the air. End of chapter 31.